Welcome, everybody. It's really, really great. Oh, Felicia, good morning. So great to see you. Yeah, welcome, everybody. So this is the second webinar in Resilient Rural's Cultivating Food Sovereignty series. And I'm really excited again to share the space with my co-host, Derek Bruno, from SevGen Consulting and with SevGen Consulting. And today we have Tim Carson, the CEO of the Alberta Association of Agricultural Societies. So looking forward to a really great informal discussion about some of the really exciting work that Tim's got going on in the progress in the food sovereignty space. So just before we get into things, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So our team members reside on both Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories. So we'd like to acknowledge all the First Nation and Métis nations of these lands. And just from a personal perspective, when it comes to reconciliation and to land, I grew up on a farm about half an hour outside of Edmonton. And that experience helped me to grow a really strong connection with the land. And also a really strong sense of the First Nation people that belonged to the land. And so that's really what's inspired me to do the work that I do in the environmental field and with municipalities and the powerful Indigenous communities that I've had the privilege of working with. And that privilege comes through my connection and collaboration with Derek Bruno. So as I mentioned, he's from SevGen Consulting, and I'll let Derek introduce himself in a bit here. But so he's known across Canada as an incredible visionary speaker and a doer in the community development and food sovereignty fields. So just some housekeeping. If anybody has any questions, you can pop your questions into the chat or raise your hand. We'll try and watch for those. I'd like to recognize the staff of Resilient Rurals as well. So Danielle Houck and Christina Fung. They're really, really great to have in our organization, and they do really excellent work. So happy to have them. And so to give you a bit of background on Resilient Rurals itself and kind of what got us here. So Resilient Rurals began as a partnership between the towns of Bruderheim, Gibbons, and Lamont, with the town of Bruderheim as lead. I work with the town of Bruderheim and as the director of Resilient Rurals. So our purpose was to create a model for small and rural communities to look at climate change adaptation and resilience, and what that looks like and how that differs from the work that's being done in larger urban centers, because it is quite different. And so the food sovereignty, the reason why we've come to that is, climate change will have a significant effect on our producers and on our food systems, and how that will impact our communities. So that food sovereignty piece is really important to us. And also one of the priorities that we defined early on as a group, our partnership of communities, was the connection with Indigenous peoples in the region. So that led us to a project that we're currently working on with Derek as a partner through SevGen. We're working on a food sovereignty project. So we were able to have an event, brought some non-Indigenous and Indigenous contributors together in Bruderheim, and it was a really great event. And now we're working on a webinar series. So that's my intro. Derek, do you want to maybe give a little bit of an intro to yourself, and we'll dive in with Tim?
Absolutely. Danse to Tom Scott Noel Gukio. It's a real pleasure to be here with each and every one of you today. I'll simply say that, on my journey back to the land, it's been such a pleasure to be working with different organizations, coming up with, ideas, hearing story, sharing wise practice. Ultimately, for myself, it's about connecting Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations together on this journey, to make this land that we live on a fantastic place to live today and also for our future generations. So look forward to today's conversation with Tim. Again, it's about I like hearing stories, so we're going to hear Tim's story. I love questions, and so let's pepper Tim with as many questions while we have his brilliant mind in this hour. So, Jill.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek. So Tim, I invite you to introduce yourself and your background, and yeah, maybe give us a glimpse of the incredible projects that you're working on right now.
Well, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think the topics we're going to cover today are kind of obviously have struck a chord with a lot of different people as I've started conversations, and it has now landed into invitations to speak to this. So I'll give just a little background on me. I'm an auto body mechanic by trade. Just to be clear on all of that, I did spend some time on a farm, and I live in a rural area just outside of Redwater right now, so I'm quite familiar with the Bruderheim area and things of that nature. I grew up outside of a little town called Newbrook, although there will be many people who will say that I've not grown up at all. I've just gotten big. So I think that's an important piece of this. From a professional standpoint, I am with the Alberta Association of Agricultural Societies. We are privileged in this province to have 291, on the cusp of 292 agricultural societies here. They encompass virtually every community across our province, from Lacrete to Cardston and Lloydminster to Hinton now. So they are everywhere. And an agricultural society's mandate, just so that everybody is also aware, there's a specific piece of legislation for agricultural societies called the Ag Societies Act. And their mandate, to paraphrase, is to promote improvements in agriculture and enhance the quality of life of people in their community. I don't know how deep we want to go into Tim's background. It's varied and been in agriculture and oil field and service industry and ice making and all of those things, pieces in between, which has given me a very broad perspective on what goes on in our great province, but more so, I think that the piece that really makes Tim tick is my commitment to rural communities. As I've been in this role now with the association for 14 years. I think I'm starting to get a pretty good grip on it, although things change on a regular basis. So I'm happy to answer any questions on ag societies or any of those types of things as we move forward. But I think the piece that I've been asked to talk about today is our exploration into what we call the rural Alberta food tech. So to rewind just a little bit, our agricultural societies have two common challenges that come up on a regular basis. They are not enough money and not enough volunteers. So as we sit as an organization and try to determine what we can do with that as a provincial association, we've sort of boiled it all down to there's just not enough people in our rural communities. It's a population deficit, and it is continuing to erode. And that translates to not enough people utilizing the facilities that the Ag Society operates, not enough people coming to their events to help them generate funds, not enough people joining their organization to provide new ideas, to provide succession. That spills over into the community where there's not enough butts and seats at the school to keep the school open. There's not enough people utilizing the hospital, utilizing all of those amazing support systems that we have in our rural communities. And it becomes very challenging to not only afford, but also have those systems grow. So having boiled it down to lack of population in our small communities, we set forth to say, okay, well, what can we do about that? Why aren't people living in our small communities? The two backbones of our great province, one is agriculture and the other one is oil and gas. The agriculture industry is has got tremendous history and has a tremendous future as well. But as technology has been included in agriculture, as our farms continue to grow, we actually need fewer people in order to accomplish greater things with that. So the opportunity for people to invest into traditional agriculture, the numbers of people are actually getting smaller all the time. It's not like you're going to wake up tomorrow and say, geez, you know, I think I'd like to start a canola farm. What do I need? Oh, yes, about $60 million. No problem. We'll get started on that. So, and it's the same in the livestock industry. It's really, you're looking at a succession plan with your family farm or a corporate farm where you have some level of succession in those things. And honestly, with the cost of equipment, a new combine running over $1 million to purchase, you have to have a lot of property. You have to have a lot of land to feed that in order to make that a profitable venture. And to solidify that thinking, just in my neighborhood alone, this past year, there were 27 quarters bought up by one organization. They were a Hutterite colony, and they've eliminated those small farm family areas to live and things of that nature, cleared all of the trees to again continue to make that program profitable. And the same thing is happening with most of the other industries, whether we're talking oil field or we're talking forestry or any of the other programs that happen in a traditional basis in our rural communities. As technology continues to be enhancing those programs, we actually need fewer and fewer people. So what do we do about that? The biggest challenge that we saw was that not that people did not want to live in small communities, it was more around there was no way for them to earn a living there. So our involvement, just to give a little more background on how we got here, our association is also responsible for Alberta's Open Farm Days. We've been doing that program for, our 11th year is coming up here now, or we've just finished our 11th year. So that has actually provided us a great platform of information on where the hosts are, what the value of agritourism is, those types of things. And we get, between ourselves and the 310 farm line, about 50 calls a month that state, how can I get started in agriculture? So all of this culminated to a spot where our intent now as an association is to create a subsidiary organization or a branch of our association that will be dedicated to driving increases in population in communities under 10,000 people, utilizing small to medium-sized, high technology food production. So by creating an awareness around the value and the opportunity that there is for individuals to begin the hydroponics program, to begin indoor farming, to begin actual food production in our small communities, will allow them to not only move their family there, but hopefully employ other families. We've had this, I've used it as a bit of an analogy, as many of our ag societies own and operate hockey rinks and curling rinks. And it's my opinion that every one of those facilities should have a greenhouse attached, where that chiller is used. We're scavenging heat from the chiller while it's operating. We've got a refrigeration system on site. We take a seasonal job and we turn it into a full-time job. It just seems to make some unique sense in that area. And I think the opportunities for this organization, this Rural Alberta Food Tech, or RAFT, because everything needs a good acronym, is to promote and bring awareness to the opportunity, to connect those people who are already doing it, whether they're doing it in a semi-urban space or in a rural space, but really bring to light the opportunity there is to invest in our smaller communities, the potential for growth and the potential to actually check a lot of different boxes in the food system that sort of became aware during the pandemic around food security and where our food comes from. Also with climate change, the ability for places like Southern California to continue to produce the volume that is required in order to feed their nation, our nation, and others with greens, I think is something that will also weigh heavily in the future. And the time is now to start implementing some of these new actions to repopulate our small communities. The people that I'm sort of targeting who have the potential to do this is You know, the person transitioning out of the petrochemical industry, it's not a far leap from there to hydroponics. We have the chance for those folks who are in an urban setting and are looking to, you know, semi-retire or take get to a smaller community and provide a level of lifestyle that it suits them. I think there's a high level of succession opportunity in the family farm or the corporate farm, where we've seen time and time again. You know, there may be a spot for that that first sibling or the second sibling to be taking over the family farm, but that third one goes to university or post-secondary and really doesn't have a spot. Well, here's a spot where they can continue to be contributing to the food system, still live in their small community, and really start to drive a new level of food security. And honestly, if we're going to really make some inroads into repopulating our rural areas, and it's not just here in Alberta, but it is across, it's a national problem across Canada. This is an amazing spot for new Canadians to take their time, talent, and treasure and invest in a small community that they will have a part in regrowing. And let's be honest, most of our small communities were brought there from people from other countries. I think that there is a tremendous opportunity with our Indigenous folks as well, and to bring that level of fresh food and new technologies and new commerce to our communities. So that's sort of the intent in a nutshell. We have a small steering committee that has been brought together of experts from different fields and different corners of the spaces that we're working in. We've only met in person or online once, and this whole project is really in its infancy. But Tim's big audacious goal is to have 30,000 new people in rural in 10 years. And I think that this really does have some tremendous growth potential. What's interesting is that there's been a insurgence of innovation within our own agricultural societies. And I just read about one yesterday whose 300-person community, the Ag Society partnered with their school and brought in a hydroponics module. And they supply 60 different types of leafy greens. They have been oversubscribed and are ordering a second module to try to keep up with demand in this small community and rural area. I think that there is tremendous potential to utilize a more regional palette. We know for a fact that the restaurants want to use local food as part of our open farm-based program. I think there's great potential to have these types of systems provide food to our schools, our hospitals, our seniors programs, local food areas. We have tremendous opportunities in the value added, where we're taking that locally grown and repackaging it, putting it in our stores and shipping it to other places, adding other local producers to that, whether that's cheese and mushrooms and strawberries or however that works. But the numbers that the technology is continuing to advance. It's already a sound program. I don't think we have to convince people that we can grow food in a new way. I think what we have to do is convince them that it is as good, if not better, than what you grow in your garden. And as we live in a northern climate, this is going to be a big deal for not only Alberta but Canada. So, with all of that, how would you like to proceed, Jill?
I already have a ton of questions, but before I start asking away, I'll just check in with everybody on the call to see if anybody has some burning questions that they want to get us started on before I do. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I have a string of questions, so anybody feel free to interrupt me as we're going. So I think the first piece, given that we really look at climate change adaptation and mitigation as one of our priorities, is so these methods that you're speaking to, how do you see them supporting the climate change adaptation and mitigation aspects into the future?
Well, in a controlled environment, we don't have to necessarily be too concerned about what's happening on the outside. I mean, right now here in Alberta, we have a complete lack of winter showing up, and we've already started drought mitigation conversations at the government levels and things of that nature. So, I mean, the opportunity to work in a controlled environment really does sort of help manage the environmental changes that we are experiencing, and really does provide a stability, if you will, in our food system. I think it's also important. I sort of missed a little piece around, in many of our communities, we have underutilized space, whether it was originally designed as commercial space and it is still vacant, or we've got structurally sound buildings that are actually vacant in our small communities that can be transitioned or refitted to create this, or to take on this type of work. The investment becomes reasonably small for these folks, or at least manageable, to do a startup. And I think that's part of this piece as well, is that it's an affordable startup for a small business.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear, is that startup side of it. In terms of resources, like, is it a resource intensive aspect with hydroponics, for example, like in comparison to other farming methods?
I don't have a deep knowledge of all of the pieces of the puzzle that are going to be required. What I do know is that there is already people doing this in Alberta. It is a growing or an emerging industry, if you will. So with this RAFT program, one of the things that we want to do is ensure that all of these people who are doing this have a connection point, have an opportunity to share best practice, have an opportunity to, where did you find that? What do we do? How do we grow it? Where does it go from there? I would not say that we're going to be the expert in everything, but we would like to be the person or the organization who connects you with the experts.
Yeah, I think that connection is super important, and we're finding that in Resilient Rurals, those connections and those relationships are really important in supporting progress.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is I've not been able to find an umbrella organization for this technology, for this type of venture. There are, like I said, there are pockets of people that are doing things that in this space now. Most of them are on the fringes of major urban centers. And quite honestly, 3 new jobs on the edge of Edmonton really doesn't provide a lot of impact, but 3 new jobs in Smoky Lake would be a really big deal. So that's the intent around this, is really focusing on the small community.
That's great. Penny, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I can just maybe comment a little bit to that. So we certainly, for Community Futures, we have worked with a couple of small businesses that are getting into this food growing space. And one of the things that we have realized is this is something that you can get into without $1 million, right? I mean, many new businesses, like Tim said, anything in agriculture, $10 million isn't going to do it. Some people can get into this small space in 100,000 or maybe less, right? Especially if you've got a partner that's got a facility. So, if you're just looking at a space that needs, racking and an upgraded heating system or things like that, I mean, it is a way that people can get into a business in an affordable manner, right? So that I hope will open the doors to many people that will look at that. Tim, I am excited too, in that, I mean, I know as an Ag Society member that many Ag Societies are actually older than the municipalities in which they're in.
Yes.
So the longevity of Ag Society has been proven, and we know 100 years ago that Ag Societies did a lot of teaching and training around ag, and to me this is just everything runs in cycles, and I see this return of this cycle where we're getting back into Ag Societies playing that very important role in rural Alberta. And I want to congratulate you for taking this on, because it isn't going to be easy, right? It is going to be a lot of work. And it is going to be a lot of this type of work, right? To find partners and stuff in community. So I congratulate the association on doing that, because everybody in this meeting understands the fundamental importance of this discussion.
Thank you. I think that from an agricultural society standpoint, there's a couple of different avenues that are going to be very important. One, they may simply be the catalyst. They're the ones who will start a conversation with the leadership in that community. I think that one of the roles of this raft organization is to actually help pave the road. We know that there are still some, municipal policy that would be, difficult to get around in transforming some of these buildings and then looking in new directions for food production. We also know that there is some significant challenges in our financial systems for the, lending money and providing support for new businesses, particularly in small communities. There is a bit of an aversion, if you will, to making a level of investment in a small community from a financial institution. So I think that there's great work to be done in those areas to actually start to compile the information that really does show the perspective and the opportunity that is available to play in this space. I think that's a really great thing. Not to mention, I think that there's a way for agricultural societies to be that welcome wagon, if you will, to help get their community ready for new people, to make it inviting, to provide those social networks necessary for new individuals to feel welcome in the community as they invest and pick up from wherever they are and come to that community. We've seen many of our ag societies take on that role on repeated things that happen in their areas, but to be very specific about how they're doing that, I think is some of those great opportunities. And having those partnerships in our 283 or now 284 communities under 10,000 people, this is big.
Thank you for that. I'm just checking to see if there's any other hands up. So if there was someone within a community, within or external to an ag society, what would be their first steps to get in touch with RAFT and utilize the resources to have these discussions? What does that process look like?
Well, first we got to get RAFT off the ground. As I mentioned earlier on, this is very much in its infancy. We've been looking for a bit of financial support from provincial government or another stakeholder to help put a person in place to start building the network. I have a lot of different things on my plate. This is just one of those things that's on the corner of my desk that my board has said, yes, let's put some effort into this to get it off the ground and really grow our opportunities for our communities. But we are really very much in our infancy. The pieces of the puzzle to get somebody on the phone to start connecting people, the creation of a website so that we have a landing place for information. I think that one of the opportunities down the road, likely in 18 months to 2 years, is actually a conference and trade show on this space. Although there have been some unique pieces around innovations in agriculture, they are significantly focused on adding technology to traditional agriculture, and where there hasn't been something that is solely focused on new agriculture, new food production here in Alberta or Canada that I can find on the interweb. So we're just starting that network space.
Okay. Is there any way that ag societies or people that are interested can offer support to help get that off the ground?
Again, we're looking at sort of a hub and spokes type of situation. And right now we haven't got enough parts to the hub. This is, I think, the third or fourth, I'll call it, public conversation on this topic. And we're seeing a groundswell. I mean, just seeing the numbers of people that are sitting here. I spoke about it in Camrose at their Reimagining Rural. And there is interest. The folks that I think should be interested around rural economic development seem somewhat standoffish, if you will, on the innovation and the lack of research that they can tangibly touch Kara is a great example of somebody who sort of has drank the Kool-Aid already and has bringing information for us, and is actually part of my little steering group, if you will. So she's got her hand up. We should let her chat.
Yeah, Kara, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, I was also at a regional egg society meeting where Tim mentioned this, and like the room was just like, you know, really focused, like, wow, this sounds great. Like, keep talking, keep moving with this. So yeah, it is striking a chord, and just like in my experience, connecting with this kind of group of folks, and like I said before the meeting started, I think it's coming together. I'm real optimistic. And even like the funding policies, like to mention, looking for funding, looking to rural economic development, looking to, I mean, even the federal government has funding out or coming out that's like agridiversity. So encouraging underrepresented populations, like, you know, to get involved in the agricultural industry, encouraging youth to consider agriculture as a career. Like, these are focus areas for the federal government. And provincially also, like that Made in Alberta initiative, the Alberta Food Processors, something like that, association has 5 years of funding to promote this Made in Alberta like branding label, just like kind of like BC has, right? So so there's these policies working for us, this funding like stream that's working for us, but you know, it is a challenge, and this came up in the Connect for Food meeting too. Like, the established players, the dominant people in this industry are strong. Like, they have a strong hold on this. So we are in that way kind of, you know, working against a strong established system. But I'm all for it. I think we need to, you know, break that centralized kind of control of the food system and put it back in the hands of the people. And I guess I have a question to finish this with, is like, I'm wondering if Perry would be interested in speaking to, like, I just see such a connection, but also like an unclear space between what we're talking about here in the production side, which is great, but then, you know, to get this distributed and taken up, like, distribution is going to be, I feel like, a difficult piece when we're talking about these small communities. How do we get enough income for the producers in a small space? That makes sense.
Well, yeah, there's a state of complexity here that you just can't ignore. And I think, you know, I didn't, this is really great, because obviously the biggest gap that we all face is not, you know, the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. And to hear all of this stuff from Tim is new to me, but it's not new at all at the same time. Like, but I'm excited to hear what Tim's talking about, and I'm sure that the wheels are also turning in Penny's head, thinking, well, we've really got to sit down with Tim and let him know, you know, what it is that we're doing out here. In some ways, you know, in a small way, I think we're a little bit ahead. We're on a kind of a leading edge here, and Tim certainly needs to know about what we're doing, and we need to. I think there's all kinds of alignment possibilities. Tim mentioned a conference in a couple of years, and this regional initiative that we started in this region to the east of Edmonton, that we're kind of loosely referring to as the Yellowhead food, you know, development region, or we haven't quite nailed that name down yet, but we do have a conference set for next April. And you know, someone, Tim or someone with what's going on in Tim's head needs to be there and needs to reveal and talk about this stuff, because this is exactly what our conference is about. It is just about getting people to start thinking about this new level of possibilities. Because at the heart of what we're doing, it is actually an economic development. We don't talk about economic developments, we talk about food. But if you read our vision, it is about rebuilding the socio-economic fabric of rural Alberta, or at least our one region at a time, I guess, through a metamorphosis of the food industry. I mean, and Tim hit the nail on the head. I mean, macro, and I've been a farmer all my life, so I'm not exactly going to turn my back on what agriculture has been, or the model of agriculture. But the fact is that model of agriculture is really not contributing anything to our rural communities. I mean, all of the, a lot of the spending from that industry leaves those communities, and it really isn't building at all. Until we switch to a more of a food-based industry versus the agriculture we've come to know, we're not going to bring more people in. We're not going to have any great increase of processing, small or mid-range processing, because the needs for processing right now are at such a high level that they tend to go elsewhere. It just doesn't work. But anyway, I don't know what else to say other than we need to have a conversation, Tim, and we need to kind of show each other our cards, I guess, and see what we can work on together here. Obviously, you can roll ahead and do plenty of things without us, but I think I have to say that for us to roll ahead and not include what you're doing would be just foolhardy.
So I am all about collaboration. Like you said, I am not the expert in the room. I prefer to surround myself with smarter people than I am. It's really an important piece about how we grow.
For me, that's actually surprisingly easy.
But I think the piece that's missing, though, Perry, is that we don't have this overarching umbrella organization that is connecting all of us who are working in this space. And for me, one of the conversations that we had around our little steering committee is I have some folks that are far too close to the ground. They're more worried about putting a shovel in the ground than inspiring people to be interested to put the shovel in the ground. Right. And I think that's where that's the gap, if you will, is actually having, all your organization, your regional group that is working diligently in this space connected with one that's working down around Medicine Hat or Lethbridge and one that's working in Peace River to start sharing these best practices and really growing that groundswell of interest. Because as stated, I think there's a couple of things. First off, I don't think we can use the terminology agriculture. I think we do have to use the term food. And I don't think it's in competition with traditional agriculture in any way, shape, or form, and it's an enhancement to it. Mm-hmm. And whether we're talking about the current players and whether they're canola farmers or pea farmers or wheat farmers or bison or all of those things, everything has its space. And we're looking at actually infiltrate unused space. Right. A few years ago, I did this goofy little TED talk around, utilizing underutilized space in a new way.
I saw that. I've seen that. Yeah, it's
did you?
brilliant.
Oh, wow. You're one of the 4 people. That's good. That's really great.
Interestingly, the big shiny model of agriculture that we've been talking about, and an industry that is really well suited for organizations like Hutterite colonies. I think it's interesting that they are kind of one of the best models to survive in this agriculture. In fact, I think the future looks a little bit unfriendly for the average individual farmer or family farm that thinks they're going to continue. I've been told by guys like Don Christensen that there's being less and less knowledge of agronomy amongst these huge farmers because they contract all of their resources out, all their crop input information, all of this is sourced, outsourced. So it's interesting that there are, and you've maybe come across these, Tim, or others of you have come across this, but there are large scale producers who are interested in doing something different. They may be farming, 12, 15,000 acres or more of land, and yet they're starting to think, gee, this model doesn't look that great down the road. Maybe we should be growing some food. And we need to reach those people and help them understand what the possibilities are.
I think that, I mean, from my perspective, the big driver in this whole program is getting people into rural. What's interesting is that I truly believe the model works. We're not reinventing the wheel. In Europe, this is a pretty standard practice. We're just blessed in this country to have vast tracts of land. We've not had to go down this road. So I don't think we're, coming up with a model that is nobody understands. I think it's more a question around how do we create a safe space for people that should come out and do this. And one of the drivers in this thing is making sure that these small communities not just survive but actually thrive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my grandson goes to kindergarten. It's an 1.5-hour bus ride one way. That to me is like, how do you build a social network around family unit and all of those types of things in that space? Now, don't get me wrong, that's not just my driver, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think that this, creating this regional food palette has really great merit. I had one of our people state that, we're never going to be able to compete against the cost of a head of lettuce coming out of California. And I can't argue with that. But if price point was the only factor, then our craft alcohol industry would have never taken off. People want to know, they want to see things built, grown, created here. They want to be part of that experience. And the other piece that we actually didn't touch on was the actual agritourism industry. This product lends itself so well to being that being able to actually provide that experience where people see where it's growing, they can do touch, smell, feel, all of that sort of thing, and be involved and be the advocate for that producer, that value chain upgrade. All of those pieces of the puzzle. It's, as you mentioned, it's quite complex. There's many different nuances to this, and there's a lot of people to influence in order for it to be successful. I think that there's if we can get a couple of places that want to pilot, man, oh man, we can really show some unique pieces, I think, actually in very short order. I can't hear you, Perry.
Kind of throw a bit of water on what you're saying about, take the head of lettuce from California, for example. Well, they're not giving consideration that the playing field is changing climatically. There's a lot of things happening where not only is California's model perhaps not sustainable, but ours may be becoming more sustainable in that regard. So that's a factor that needs to be always considered.
I agree.
I hate to interrupt, but we do have a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you saw them, Jill.
Yeah, I was just gonna lead to that. So we have one that's asking where you see existing greenhouse space in this program. So growing food not in an enclosed space, such as Teal's greenhouse, which they believe you're familiar with.
I think there's space for all of this. I think there's actually opportunity for expansion in the current greenhouse sector. Moving in more into the food production side of things, because they are already established, there may be there may be opportunities that would be unique to them because they are already working in this space. The question is, what does that transition look like? Is that something that they are interested in transitioning to? Again, I mean, greenhouses are exceptional examples of providing employment in small communities. How do we turn it into something that's more 365 days a year instead of that spring and fall group? Is the question. And I think that there's these great symbiotic relationships that need to happen as well. Whether we're bringing in the opportunity for higher education with linking with the school systems or whatever that looks like, or linking with commercial industry. in some way, shape, or form to utilize some symbiotic relationships with energy use and those types of things. I think that there's unique space here. Even on, you know, with a traditional greenhouse, perhaps there's, you know, bringing in the, you know, more solar or geothermal or something along those lines that allows them to be, you know, operated very effectively and efficiently on a 365-day basis here in our -40 to +40 environment here in Alberta.
All right, thank you for that. And then another question is, how important is public education and awareness, raising around food sovereignty? So what steps by RAPT, ag societies, local governments can be taken to educate communities about its importance and principles?
Again, so from a agricultural society standpoint, if that local group wants to take up this journey and be a champion in their community, there's a great space for them to work in there to bring that educational component in. We have access to 4-H and other youth-oriented organizations in those rural communities where I think we'll have a greater uptake more quickly than those particularly in the major urban centers. So I'm not sure that putting it into an actual curriculum on Alberta education is necessarily the space. But we also have, you know, unique programs that are set up within schools and post-secondary as well. I mean, that they can focus on these areas. We're looking at, you know, things like Olds College and Lakeland College that are very ag-based. But even in their smart farm programs, it's still very much how do we get new technologies into traditional farming for better, you know, better farming. So I think we need to broaden and start actually looking at some of these, I'll call them niche programs for right now before they come onto mainstream. I did want to mention that I don't know how many people have heard of the Young Agrarians. They're a group that is actually dedicated to educating young people on agriculture, and they are actually part of our steering group. And they don't see this as competition, and neither do I. They're very much working in the traditional space, and they see this. We see this as enhancing each other's programs and not really competing, but really being able to provide that broad base of information that will allow people to excel in the area of interest that they have.
Yeah, thanks for that. We yeah, the Young Agrarians are a great resource. We were actually lucky to have them as guest speakers at our previous webinar. So we're still absorbing all of that great info. Penny, I see you have your hand up.
Sure, just another comment to back up Tim around capacity. Some of the conversations we've been having, many of the cannabis growing operations started in rural Alberta. And some of them are transitioning or looking to transition to food, you know, so those are facilities that are already built to food grade standard, you know, and so how do we help them transition over to a different product, into a food product instead of a cannabis product? Because seen as, you know, cannabis doesn't seem to be the profit maker that everybody thought it was going to be. So, you know, when you start looking at those things, I think there's a fairly easy transition. And yeah, and Tim, you're right. I mean, I think every small community's got vacant buildings somewhere, right? It is how do we access them? How do we work with our municipalities to make it so those things can be transitioned over to something?
Thanks, Penny. Danielle, you have a question?
Just another one that was in the chat, but I've been wondering myself. I see you've got a very big focus on this hydroponic, using space that's there not as well used, which is great because really there's no reason we shouldn't be able to optimize all the space that we have that isn't being used. And there's other benefits, like if you have a greenhouse on the side of an arena, they're going to need to heat less of the arena because it adds added insulation. But I am curious, you've talked about how there is room for Indigenous communities in this space, and Ronak also mentioned, how does this work you're doing relate to Indigenous cultural preservation? So like their traditional gathering methods, perhaps, or traditional small farming practices that might be more diverse on the land without these facilities that control the climate. How do you see that fitting into your idea?
So I haven't had the opportunity to really delve down the cultural impact on the Indigenous world. I haven't really had the opportunity. I just see any community, regardless of where they're from, to work on their own sustainability and their own food system and have that security within their own control, I think is a positive piece. What was the second half of that question? I lost in that one now.
How traditional small farming that tends to be more
Yes.
diverse on the land itself, how that might factor in.
So what I'm seeing is that a lot of these, call it the small farm themselves, is being bought up by the big farm. So that's fine. And what I'm also seeing is that there's this sort of 3 to 5 to 10 acre piece that's left over that has the house on it, the shop, a few outbuildings, the water, the sewer, the power, all of those pieces, where that small farming operation could take on a role of adding this in, controlled climate food production on that space, where it would be right next door to the major commercial farmer, utilizing that building that's already there, that is what I would be considered low-cost housing, right? Which is also checking off a box in, affordable housing for people. Utilizing some of these buildings and some of these spaces that are in rural is a really, really big opportunity. And I think that there's that space, and they can have their alpacas and their chickens and all of those pieces on their farm as well as this controlled space.
Thank you, Tim. Kara, do you have your hand up with a new question?
Yeah, just one more thing, I think. Yeah, you can hear me? Okay. Like talking about these vacant buildings, like I threw this at Tim early on, this idea of getting funding from the Alberta Real Estate Foundation, but I think we have to come back around to it, because this is kind of exactly what they would be interested in, is like, how do we revitalize rural real estate and have it like, live up to its value. And then just kind of, this is how I see it. And I've been part of a few of these conversations, and maybe it's just like correct me if I'm wrong, I guess, but like Connect for Food, I see as more of a network. I think most of you have seen the food wheel, right? So we're all like around the table, all building these relationships, and like the similar thing that was done with the Northlands Ag Society, with the Alberta Flavor Learning Lab, I think was a similar idea, and they were trying to build those relationships. So, and then I went through I've been going through this for a while, but differentiating the raft idea, I mean, it is focused more on the producers and creating that support network. So having that organization support those players. And then also, I think a good example for raft is going to be like the Rural Development Network, the stuff that they put out like toolkits and resource books, and like how newcomers can get involved in co-ops, or how like rural communities can bring newcomers into their workforce, not focused on newcomers, but just for example. So that's how I see those differentiating. And like the Young Agrarians are a great model for the farmer to farmer learning, right? But no, we're not in competition with them. And I'll just say, like, I don't think any of us are in competition, right? Like what we're building is something to work together to like try to rival the 5, I think, conglomerates who are running the food system. So I think there's room for all of us, and there's a abundance mentality here, not a scarcity. There's enough room for all of us. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, thank you. I really like that, Kara. Danielle, you have a question?
Yes, I had one question, because I know it was mentioned needing to talk to the municipalities, the rural municipalities, to try and draw people in too. And I've seen places like Bruderheim before. They have programs where if you move to Bruderheim, your property tax is waived for 3 years and stuff. And I was really curious if you had reached out to any municipalities to see if they'd do a similar incentive, but with the goal of attracting small scale food producers to the area. Like I had that thought, if I myself, I'd love to, if I could buy a house that I could afford, because housing's crazy right now, in a small community, with the intention of my labor going into producing food for that community, and the municipality helped get me there. Like, that would open countless doors, and of course any money I'd be making would be going to taxes for that municipality, so it supports them too. And I was just wondering if something like that had been approached as an option yet, or if it's still kind of too early to think that way.
It's not too early by any stretch. It's been part of my sort of quiver of information that I've been building out. We haven't gone that far yet. I think it's important to recognize that, you know, most municipalities have some level of economic development established, you know, whatever that looks like, and have to appeal to a broad group of opportunities. But I think the goal would be very much, as you're saying, is to say, put a little bit of effort or focus on this industry to see where it might take you, because we're not always going to get a new, you know, lumber plant or a new something very large. I think if we can create the space where food production in a non-traditional way has great potential for growth in a small community, that's when those light bulbs will come on for those folks, because, you know, we're oftentimes looking for the Moby Dick instead of the guppy that will grow. So I think that those are sometimes some of the hurdles, and you know, from a raft perspective, I think that's the style of conversation where we want to start that up to say, here's some opportunities. We need the municipalities to be on board, whether they're RMA or Alberta municipalities, in supporting the idea, and then looking internally to say what they can do to attract those folks, because that's likely where the major competition is going to happen, right? Whereas I'm an entrepreneur coming from somewhere and I'm looking for a place to go. Where am I going to go? What does that look like? What are the incentives from the municipality? What does it look like for my family to live there? What does the volunteerism look like? What do they have for recreational facilities? Those types of things now become, where am I going to invest? And I think that will be another piece of the conversation on how our municipalities will begin to, you know, represent themselves in this context.
Well, thank you, Tim. Tara?
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
So I am based in Parkland County, and at this time, Parkland County is going through like a revamp of their municipal development plan. I am not in any way familiar really with municipality procedure or how to approach them or how one would get involved, but this seems like a really good opportunity when they're doing this municipal development plan to have this conversation struck. Do you have any recommendations on how I might get that started, knowing none of the players and not knowing how one would go about? I mean, I think that a lot of their public consultation is already passed, so I don't know if I still have a chance to get in there or what.
So let's be honest. This conversation started because I shot my mouth off at a space with people who are somewhat influential. So speaking with the economic development officer or somebody within their team is likely a good start. There may already be somebody on municipal council that is sympathetic or appreciative of this, you know, may have aspirations or may already have connections to a greenhouse or something along those lines that may have a point of reference that would make sense. Again, you know, this concept of raft and all of these types of things from our perspective is very much in its infancy. We've not, you know, there's not enough meat on the bone yet. We've got what I think is a really solid idea. It has struck a chord with many people. The question is now, how do we take what we're learning and start to implement some of this? And from my perspective, keeping the conversation going and ensuring that, you know, we're building a network. And to Perry's point and to Kara's point, we have to know what else is going on so that we can enhance each other's work and really build that awareness so that the people who are on the outside looking for an opportunity will find out about it.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I just have, there's a comment in the chat about if Rural Development Network can help in any way to let them know. And then Trisha Hampton with the RDN has stepped away, but we're at time. This has been a really fantastic conversation and accomplished exactly what we were hoping for, is really building those bridges and getting an understanding of how non-Indigenous and Indigenous players and contributors in the field can start making those connections and building relationships for this work. And so thank you so very much, Tim, for the time that you provided us, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm really liking getting to see these familiar faces and starting to build these networks and whatnot. So thank you again so much. And we'll have more information coming for future events. And I did throw also into the chat just a real quick acknowledgement to the Municipal Climate Change Action Center. Their funding has supported us in this webinar and other work that we've done, and they're fantastic to work with. So Rana Patel is on the line with us as well. So just a really big thanks.
If anybody is looking for my contact information or just want to continue a conversation, I'm Tim at albertaagsocieties.ca, and you can find us through our website. So I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
I have your card. Definitely following up. We really got some dots to connect here. I had no idea really that this is what you're up to. So
It's just one tiny piece of the puzzle.
So we'll connect and probably include Penny or whomever else. We need to share with you a little more about this Connect for Food process. I've mentioned a couple of times, it sounds like Connect for Food is like some sort of an organization or an initiative. It actually is not. It's just really just a way means of connecting people. So it's kind of a gap filler for what used to be called extension, if anybody remembers that term. So,
Yes, I do. Awesome.
okay. Thanks you guys for doing this.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day and a good weekend, and Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.